Hey everyone, Hannah here with Social 101 for winter semester. So today I'm going to give you a sense of how our class will be structured, and I'm also going to start lecturing on some of the foundational terms for our class. All right, so typically what I'll do for our class is I'll have a PowerPoint and I'll also record myself going over everything, and then you all will have access to both. So today is introductions. I always provide an agenda, so today I'm going to introduce myself, introduce basic ideas from our class. I'll talk about theory, I'll go over terms, I'm going to go over overarching themes, and then more terms. All right, introducing me and the class. So my name is Dr. Liebrecht. I am originally from Ohio. I actually just drove back to Ohio today, so I'm a little tired and have been in my car for 10 hours. I did my bachelor's at Ohio State University, my master's at West Virginia University, and I finished my PhD in 2020 from the University of Hawaii, Manoa. So I lived in Hawaii for almost 7 years. And a fun fact, because I asked you all to share a fun fact on the discussion board post. In my spare time, I like to hula hoop. And so I dance and I hula hoop at the same time. All right. So as far as the class, I just want to go over some stuff in the syllabus. So, all right. So here's our syllabus. Make sure you have the textbook. I do have a PDF of the first chapter, but that's only one that the authors give us access to. So once you've completed that PDF, you want to make sure you're checking in with the bookstore to get your book. And if you have any issues, feel free to email me. I pretty much have the bookstore folks on speed dial because issues always arise every semester, right? I do expect students to be on time, punctual, and show up, even though this is an online class. And so that means that you're completing your assignments on time and you're not submitting things consistently 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes late, right? And I'll go over the course schedule at the end because that's on the last page of the syllabus. Class environment, we want to make sure that we're making everyone feel heard and we're providing space for people to talk about their lived experiences. Sociology is the study of society versus psychology, which is the study of the mind or the psyche. We study society, and so people are going to talk about how they interact in the world and in society. So we want to be respectful of other people's experiences. They're going to be different than our own, and we can learn from each other because of those differences. I also have a commitment to anti-oppression in the classroom. This is important to me. I have had issues where topics related to sexism or racism or ableism have come up in my class. And so by revisiting this commitment, it allows us to have voices be heard and feelings validated when we're having conversation. Now, I know we're not having discussion in real time because this is an asynchronous online class, but some of the stuff you write about for some of the assignments are available to everyone in the class. And so you'll be sharing with each other, albeit typing. And so, making sure that we're respectful of each other and we are not saying problematic things or typing, I guess, problematic things instead of looking at what oppression looks like. And so you can read over those on your own time. I do expect students to read the syllabus from start to finish all the way through, but I'm not going to read it out loud to you here because I know that you all are adults and responsible and will do that on your own time. It's actually an assigned reading for this class, and you can be examined on it for one of the exams. All right. Gender pronouns, if you use different pronouns than what is on your profile for Moodle, let me know. If you want to use a different name, let me know. Anything like that. You all know about academic honesty and plagiarism and all that good stuff. As far as AI, I do allow AI for the purpose of proofreading and editing and things like that. So if you want to use Grammarly or that type of product, you can. But you should not use AI for the purpose of generating content. So when you're writing stuff for this class, you should be thinking critically and coming up with your own original ideas based off of what you're reading and learning in this class. And if you have any questions about plagiarism, academic honesty, and AI, you can always email me. All right. So here are all like my basic policies about, excuse absences. Most of this comes from university policy, right? So again, read through that on your own time. This is what students care about, right? How are you going to be assessed? How is your end of semester grade going to be recorded? So there's 200 points for our semester. You have chapter reviews, discussion posts, and 2 exams. The chapter reviews, there are 10 of them. There are 5 of them, and they are worth 10 points each. So that's where the 50 points comes from. And there's a guideline that I'll show you. You can download it from Moodle that will help you outline. But essentially what you're doing is you're outlining all the key concepts and key ideas from a chapter, and then you're submitting that. Now, this also benefits you because it's going to help prepare you when it comes time to study for your exams. Discussion posts, again, there are 5 of them, and they're worth 10 points each. One thing that students sometimes forget, you have to post your original post, and then you have to respond to at least one classmate to get full credit. So just be aware of that. And then the exams are traditional exams, multiple choice, true, false, maybe 1 or 2 short responses, and those will all be online on Moodle. But if you want more information, there's more information here about those assignments. This is something a little unique that I do for all my classes. My expectation is that you read the syllabus from beginning to end on your own time. And then this is sort of a contract or an agreement that you understand what the expectations are for our class, and so do I. And so once you've read everything and you feel like you understand what the expectations are, you sign off on all these things. And then finally, when are all these things due, right? So here is our 3-week schedule. You can see that there is a chapter review and a discussion board post due every Monday and every Wednesday. So you're going to be doing a lot of writing weekly. You should be watching a lecture every Friday and Tuesday. And then there's a big assignment most Thursdays, not always. So this week you get a pass, but for weeks 2 and 3, you will have an exam, okay? If you have any questions about any of these things, let me know. Now, as far as what our class looks like, let me pull that up. So if you go to CCU Moodle, now sometimes, especially at the beginning or end of a semester, you can't find your new class here. So you just search that way, or you can look up things this way, that way, just FYI. So here's our class. Here's where our syllabus is. Click on that link, download it, boom, you have access to it. Here's other rubrics and important documents. So for the chapter reviews that you'll be doing, you should follow this template. Here's the textbook chapter. I mentioned that that's a PDF, so you can get started on that reading even if you haven't gotten the book yet. And then as far as where to submit things, and I just realized I'm in student view. I'm going to switch to, I'm in my view. I'm going to switch to student view. Okay, so here's where all of your chapter review submissions will be. And here's where all your discussion posts will be. So you can see that I have the submission stuff prepared for all of them, but they're hidden from you. So you can only see the submission portals for the stuff that's due for week 1. And so once you've used that template and you've completed a chapter review for one of the chapters that we're reading this week, click on there and you add submission. That should be in a Word or PDF file. All of the chapter reviews should be. The chapter review should align with the week we're in. So if you go back to our schedule, chapter reviews 1 and 2 are week 1, and we are reading chapters 1 through 5. So those 2 chapter reviews should be chapters 1 through 5. Similarly, for week 2, for chapter review 3 and chapter review 4, you should choose one of the chapters 6 through 9. And then finally, our third week, for chapter review 5 and chapter review 6, you'll want to choose chapters 10 through 13. Now, you'll notice that there is a 6th chapter review and a 6th discussion board post, but you may remember that I said that there's only 5 for the semester. That's because you can't make up the discussion boards or the chapter reviews after the deadline without a university excused absence. So I give everyone a freebie. If you miss one of those assignments, you can make up a chapter review and a discussion board post at the end of the semester by completing chapter review 6 and discussion board 6 on that Wednesday, the last week of classes. So that sort of helps to boost people up if you missed an assignment. All right. And then here you can see the discussion posts have prompts. So typically there'll be at least 2 prompts to choose from, and you only have to choose one. The first prompt isn't like that because it's very basic. Everyone's just introducing themselves to each other. And then you can see here, there's a 1 and a 2. Those are the 2 prompts. And you can see that says, or you only need to respond to 1 prompt, okay? And then again, make sure you're responding to at least 1 classmate, right? Okay. So I think that introduces me as well as our class and Moodle. So let's get into it. The first thing we're going to talk about is some of the foundational theory to sociology. So sociology is a study of society, and these 3 men are sort of foundational theorists in our field. So Marx, you may have heard it before in a political science class, maybe even a history class in high school. He's most associated with the theory, conflict theory. So in sort of a surface level definition, conflict theory, Marx is concerned with and being critical of inequalities between workers, mostly people who are working in factories based off of the era of when he was writing, and then the owners, the people who own those factories, and sort of the exploitive nature of the workers' labor. Now, he was writing at the height of the Industrial Revolution. So that's why he was particularly concerned with the exploitive labor practices in factories, right? Because that's when that was like the main thing happening during that time period. Similarly, Durkheim and Weber were also roughly writing around that same time during the Industrial Revolution, but they're taking on a different approach, or they're thinking about society and societal issues in a different way. So Durkheim is most closely connected to the theory of structural functionalism. So again, as people during the Industrial Revolution are moving from agrarian life and moving from rural areas to more urban spaces, so from farmland and farming to urban areas and factories, he's looking at how do large-scale industrialized urban societies hold together without the bonds of tradition. He was worried that all these changes were happening so quickly that somehow society wouldn't be as cohesive as it once was. And then finally, Weber is most closely associated with the theory of symbolic interactionism. Now, he's looking at another important aspect that sort of started to be more prevalent in our society during the Industrial Revolution, and that's bureaucracy. So bureaucracies are state or government agencies, and he was looking at how bureaucracy makes industrialized societies efficient, but it also dehumanizes the experiences of people in that society. And so if you think about your experiences even today at a state agency, like the DMV is sort of a classic example in our modern society of a government bureaucracy. It's efficient. You're going to go in there. We might complain about how long the wait time is, right? But you're going to go in there and you're going to get your tags, you're going to get your driver's license, or whatever it is that you need to do. However, you're not likely to know the people working there. You're not likely to have a conversation about your family and what's happening in your lives. Versus in rural agrarian before the Industrial Revolution society, if you went in to take care of business things, you're going to go to a small town post office or something like that, a general store, something like that, and you're probably going to know the people working there. You're probably going to know the majority of the other people who are in there doing their business. And so you're going to take the time to make small talk and ask each other about your families and your lives and things like that. Okay, so those are the three theorists. And if you can remember nothing else at the end of our very short semester, remember Marx, Durkheim, Weber, and their related theories: conflict theory, structural functionalism, and symbolic interactionism. And we'll continue reviewing this chart throughout the semesters to sort of ingrain it in your brain. All right, moving right along. Summary terms from chapter 1. The sociological imagination, this is a more contemporary theory in our field, but it also is a foundational thing that's really important for you to understand. And so C. Wright Mills, who coined this term, was looking at how do things in the private sphere also relate to the public. He's interested in social structures. So what structures in our world organize society? And he was also looking at how things in our private everyday lives, how they sort of can translate into the public big picture things in our society. The authors also talk a lot about capitalism and consumer culture in chapter 1, as well as some of the other earlier chapters, chapters 2 and 3. They do this, especially in chapter 1, by talking about blue jeans. So blue jeans have for decades now become symbolic of capitalism and Western society. We can think about, and the authors encourage you to do so, we can think about how the different components of a pair of blue jeans are made in places all over the world. And so the material, the cloth, that comes from one place. The dye to make them blue comes from another place. The thread comes from one place. Maybe the actual fabric is made in one country, but then the jeans themselves are sewn together in another country, and yet they're being sold in Western countries. We can also think about how there are different looks for blue jeans. So based off of different aspects of your identity, your age, your gender, your socioeconomic status, you're going to wear different blue jeans, and you're sort of signaling to other people in our society things about your identities based off of the type of jeans you like and the jeans you wear. And so, we know that there is a men's section and a women's section at virtually all clothing stores. And so immediately men and women are just going to be drawn to and expected to buy different jeans. We know that jeans can be really cheap, especially if we think about fast fashion, like Forever 21 or I can't think of the one that's really popular right now, but it's like a website, and they've been all over headlines for being problematic in terms of their pollution and everything. But anyway, you can get a pair of jeans at fast fashion companies, $10, $15, $20. But you can also pay hundreds of dollars for designer jeans. And depending on how much money you pay, people know that certain brands are cheap and certain brands are expensive. So you're essentially signaling your class status by the type of jeans you wear. Okay, and then the 3 overarching themes. These are introduced in chapter 1, but the textbook authors continue to draw upon these 3 overarching themes in almost every chapter of the textbook because they're a way to analyze different content that we study in sociology. So what does it mean? Material culture, structure agency, micro-macro, what are these things? Well, material culture is looking at the material things, so the physical things in our society, like blue jeans, but also the other clothes we wear, the food we eat, the furniture we have. And then we look at what all these things mean culturally. What do they symbolize in our society? Because different items in our society, different material goods in our society are symbolic of, have different symbolism in different cultures. And so we need to be thinking about that. Structure and agency. So we tend to, especially in Western society, want to believe that we have a lot of agency as individuals. We as individuals can go out and choose whatever we want. We can be whatever we want to be. We can wear whatever we want to wear. But actually, in sociology, we start to look at how structured the world around us is. So yes, we could theoretically, going back to that blue jeans example, wear any blue jeans we want, right? but we're probably not going to. I mean, immediately we're going to go into a gendered part of a department store to pick out our jeans. So already that's 50% of the jeans being sold at that store are off limits to us based off of our gender or our perceived gender. And then we have to think about, well, what can we actually afford? Like, I, on a professor's salary, cannot afford $200-300 designer jeans, right? Probably a lot of us can't afford that. So we think we have agency and we can buy whatever we want. But actually, there's all these social structures in place in our society that make it so that we can't. Okay. Micro, macro. This is looking at micro aspects of our society, so small scale things. This is sort of like the everyday worlds that we live in. What are we experiencing on a day-to-day basis? Versus the macro level is like the macro, the big scale things in our society. And as we start to learn more about social institutions and other larger structures in our society, this one will make more sense. But I would also argue micro macro is probably the most intuitive of the three. And then finally, I add a fourth overarching theme, race, class, and gender, often referred to as intersectionality. This is a way to think about how all those aspects of our identity that I referred to earlier when I was talking about the types of blue jeans we're most likely to wear. How do our identities shape not only our lived experiences and how we operate in the social world on a day-to-day basis, but also how these identity categories influence these macro, big level social structures? Because race, class, gender, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, all these identity categories that we as individuals carry, they also influence how social institutions are structured. So I'll talk more about this in a minute after I define what a social institution is. Okay. Additional key terms. What is a social institution? One of my few complaints about our textbook is that they write about social structures and social institutions a lot, but I don't feel like they give a really great definition of a social institution. So this is my definition for you. It is a social structure or mechanism that organizes our everyday lives. These are the big things that we can't really change as individuals. Now, it's often easier for people to think of examples of social institutions. So these are things like education and school, government and policy, religion, family. These are all big level structures that organize our everyday lives in our social world. So those are some of the classic examples we use in sociology. Now, if you think about family as an example, how does race, class, gender, and these identity categories influence family? Well, think about the different roles we have in our family. Those are gendered, right? Mom, woman, dad, man, brother, boy, sister, girl, right? We also might think about, you might say, well, class doesn't play a huge or doesn't really influence family, but it does, because the family structure that you live with is often dictated by socioeconomic status. So, or where you live geographically in the world. So in Eastern societies, you're much more likely to live in intergenerational households with grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins. But in the US and most Western countries, we often think when we imagine in our head who we live with or who people are supposed to live with, it's the nuclear family, right? So mom, dad, kids, dog, white picket fence, all that stuff. And you can apply this idea of identity categories and thinking about how they influence social institutions. Okay. Systemic. This is something that's important for us to think about, especially when we're discussing macro level issues in social institutions. So these are fundamental and deeply rooted into social structures and into the social fabric of our everyday lives. So you often, increasingly on social media, you hear people talk about systemic racism or systemic sexism. It's about these isms and how they infiltrate social structures. So, well, I've digressed. We'll just leave it for that now. So I've already mentioned a little bit Western versus Eastern culture. I think it's important, especially since the textbook authors talk a lot about consumerism and capitalism in the early chapters. It's important for us to think about individualism versus collectivism. So individualistic societies focus on the person more, versus collectivist societies tend to focus more on community. So often when we're comparing societies in Eastern versus Western culture, we have to think about, well, what is the focus in that society? And I think most students know, but just to ensure, we in the US and most Western countries are individualistic in nature, and Eastern societies, like Japan, for example, are often collectivist. And then finally, we talked about race, class, and gender theory. I also want to mention intersectionality. And again, this is my own definition. Your textbook authors do define this as a key term, but not so much later, so I'm introducing it now. It's the interconnectedness of systems of oppression, looking at race, class, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, ableism, sizeism, and other aspects of identities to answer questions about how these forms of privilege and oppression overlap and intersect. Okay. That was a lot of information. That was a mouthful of a definition. We will continue to learn more about these things throughout the semester because they're foundational to the field of sociology. Okay, so for now, be reading stuff, which is how I refer to our textbook, chapters 1 through 5. Make sure you have access to the book, and then be sure to sign and submit your syllabus agreement as soon as possible to me. Other than that, that's all I have for you. Make sure you're doing your chapter reviews and your discussion posts. You have 2 due this week, right? So, 2. So you have, well, I guess today's Friday, so, or you can access this video Fridays, but Monday and Wednesday, you have chapter reviews and discussion board posts. All right, that's all I have for you. Have a great week, everyone.